Hello, CBINT. Rabbi Alter here with a Shabbat message for Parashat Vayikra. It's March 27th. It's the 2nd of Nisan, and we continue our isolation as a consequence of the coronavirus. I miss seeing you all in person, but we're so happy to have so many of you in our morning and evening minyanim, and in Chazan Stein's sing-along, in my Pesach class, and in phone calls and other opportunities to connect. But we do look forward to the day when we can gather in the synagogue building again. The coronavirus has turned the world on its head, and one of the, to me, very interesting things about this experience is that there's a global emergency going on over something that we cannot see, at least not with our eyes. And we've all been ordered into our homes, into physical distancing, on the assumption, on the understanding that the surfaces of our homes, of our objects, are contaminated with the virus, that our hands are therefore contaminated and carriers. And though we cannot see it, we have organized our lives now around the conviction that that which we cannot see is or may be there, and must be taken most seriously. And this phenomenon of taking seriously and organizing our lives around something that we cannot see is, I think, relevant to this week's Parsha and the whole book of Vayikra and its concern with sacrifices. We make offerings to God, we give to God, but we cannot see God's acceptance. We offer our sacrifices just as we now offer our prayer, and we cannot see that God has accepted what we've offered. And yet the Torah tells us that that's exactly what we strive to achieve. We strive to achieve God's acceptance. In the Parsha, we read in chapter 1, verse 3, Yakriv oto lirtzono lifnei Adonai, he shall bring it, the offering that is, to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in his behalf before the Lord. And then, and when the priest lays his hand upon the animal in this case, again, we read that he does so in a manner that it should be acceptable. V'nirtzalo, from the word rotzeh, from the word want or desire, and receive, accept. So it's interesting with the sacrifices. How did our ancient ancestors have any notion that an offering was accepted? Well, if it was a burnt offering, that smoke rose up to the sky, as smoke rises up to the sky still today. And that upward motion, that ascent of the smoke toward what was, and I think for many is, understood to be God's abode, the place where God is above, that ascent of the smoke up on high, must have given encouragement to our ancestors that the smoke from the offering which they offered, from the thing which they brought forward, that ascending smoke was a positive signal that God had accepted it. And similarly, we read in this parsha and many, many times that a sacrifice was sweet-smelling. Isha reach nichoach. Isha from the word eish, fire. Reach nichoach, that it was a pleasing, a pleasant smell. We know this from when we do barbecue, right? That or when we make a campfire, that when we light a fire and the smoke goes up, rather than, sideways or just kind of hovering over the fire, we know that when a campfire produces a healthy smoke that goes up, there's a satisfaction. Right, that's how it should be. That's a good fire. That's gonna make a lasting flame. And also that when we put on barbecue, that smell, when we know it's got that richness and that fullness that permeates, and there's a sense, and that too, a sense goes up. There's again a sense that just a confidence that when it looks right, when it smells right, when it goes up as it should, it is as it should be, and it will be accepted by God. And that confidence in God's acceptance of the offering is critical for everything that will follow, for the other forms of sacrifice that assume and sustain and build the relationship, but they all come after the establishment, the checking in with, the reaffirmation of our relationship with God. And this is the subject of the book, right? Robert Alter, again, not my relative so far as I know, but one of my favorite commentators, he writes that the previous book of the Torah, Exodus, concluded with a notice of God's relationship with Israel in the wilderness, indicating how God led the people on its peregrinations, its wanderings, with the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. But now the tabernacle, the Mishkan, having been completed, attention is turned to how Israel, on its part, is to pursue its relationship with God by offering sacrifices in the sanctuary that has been constructed. Right? God established relationship with us, and now it is our turn to give priority, to give attention to establishing and maintaining relationship with God. And that's why we are interested that our offerings should be accepted. We don't want to be talking to a wall. We want to know that, or talking to nothingness. We want to know that we have a listening ear on the other end, a receiving heart on the other end, that our offerings are accepted, and then the relationship can go from there. Of course, our relationship with God is a model for our relationship with one another, just as our relationship with one another is a model for our relationship with God. And in this time of isolation, in this time of physical distancing, both in our homes and on the sidewalks when we're out taking a walk, this question of how we approach one another when we can't be too close, but how we approach one another, how we establish relationship, how we make sure that our offerings, that what we do are acceptable, this is a subtle and interesting question that we need to give attention to. And so it seems to me that one of the important matters in the book of Leviticus and Vayikra is that intention is terribly important, and form is also important. We sometimes get frustrated that form is overemphasized, but form does matter, and the intention behind the form is terribly important too. How we do things and the spirit with which we do them is terribly important. So in the home, how we lay a table, how we make a bed, the generosity with which we address one another, the patience with which we address one another, make requests of one another, the little kindnesses that we show to one another, all of these offerings should be done with a full heart and in the right way, in an aesthetic way, in a proper way, in a careful and lovely way. Let us be that generous with one another. And out on the street, when we're practicing our physical distancing, let's not hide our faces, hide our eyes, avoid eye contact with one another. Fine, so we're 6 feet apart. But let's approach as close as we can. Let's approach one another standing upright with bright faces, with good eye contact, with smiles, and make room for one another, make passage for one another, safe passage for one another. And let's, in that way, by meeting eyes with a smile, let's know that our offerings, that our gestures are acceptable, are warmly offered and warmly received, and that they are the foundation to relationships that we can even deepen despite the physical distancing that is the order of the day. Shabbat Shalom to you all. I look forward to seeing you at 5:45 this evening for our Kabbalat Shabbat, and again at 8 o'clock tomorrow night for Havdalah. Shabbat Shalom.